Honourable Member for St. Peter.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, before I start my presentation, I want to crave your indulgence, because I think this is one of the most important pieces of legislation that we would probably pass in the history of this Parliament. So I'd like to crave your indulgence to grant me permission to go over time, a little over my usual hour that I'm allotted, if the House would agree, Madam Speaker. Because I have a lot to say, Madam Speaker. And I don't know if at the end, I've not started yet, and I don't know if at the end of my presentation, Madam Speaker, if I'll be hauled before some disciplinary tribunal. So it's very, very important for me. A disciplinary tribunal of my party. So I just want to ask the House for some extra time. Madam Speaker, I rise to make my contribution on this bill, shortly entitled Antigua and Barbuda Citizenship by Investment Act 2012, which has been, for the last 2 days, a matter of a lot of controversy, not only here, but of course the length and breadth of this country. But Madam Speaker, like every member of this honourable House, I'm a patriotic citizen of this beloved country of ours. And in that regard, in my interventions over the years that I've been here, and in my debates in this venerable place, Madam Speaker, I always seek to place the interests of the people of Antigua and Barbuda before any other consideration. Uppermost in my mind, Madam Speaker, at all times, is whether we have good legislation and whether we adopting that legislation in this House serves the interests and the people of this country. It is only if I'm convinced in my own mind, Madam Speaker, that the people's interests are well served, then I would support laws which our nation has to live with. My contribution as always, Madam Speaker, has been dedicated to my beloved constituents of St. Peter and generally to the people of our beloved nation of Antigua and Barbuda. But opinions, Madam Speaker, which I may put forward this evening in this presentation, may not be the same as those of the others in the great Antiguan Labour Party, the Antigua and Barbuda Labour Party, of which I have the honor to be a member, and I stand here this evening as the proud parliamentary representative of the people of St. Peter, under the auspices of the Antigua Labour Party. I'm always cognizant of that. Having said that, Madam Speaker, differences of opinion, and most importantly, tolerated and respected differences of opinion, are what form the very core and the fundamental principles of democracy within any organization. And indeed, our beloved Antigua and Barbuda Labour Party is a democratic and indeed very open organization. We are well aware of the old saying that where two men always agree, one of them is a liar and the other is a fool. And lying to or trying to make fools of each other, or of our members, or the people of this beloved nation, Madam Speaker, is not what Labour is about. In arriving at my decision on this particular legislation, Madam Speaker, I'm conscious and very conscious that neither time nor history is static. In the tides of fortune, the interests of a nation change, and it would be a moribund ship of state that tied itself to an unmovable anchor, Madam Speaker, even as the turbulent waters around it threatened to overturn it. Our ship of state is now tossing in such turbulent waters, and the risk of capsizing is very great. People are hungry out there. Unemployment, Madam Speaker. GDP has decreased, Madam Speaker. The reasons that our ship of state is being buffeted forward and aft are manifold, and much of it has to be linked directly to the policies of the government, and this is a stark reality. It's not playing politics, Madam Speaker, but is directly linked to the policies of a government over 9 years who have sunk our country into a morass and have failed to lift us out of it. And Madam Speaker, we have been trapped in this turmoil. The point is, we are in the midst of it. So what are we going to do? Freeing the country from the buffering it now endures will not occur if we anchor our thinking and our imagination and our creative juices so deeply that we lose the flexibility, the agility of mind that is required by us legislators in this honorable House. And at this juncture in our history, Madam Speaker, and that is why I prefaced my comments tonight by saying this may perhaps be one of the most critical and important pieces of legislation ever to be debated in this House. At this juncture in our history, our nation cannot close off avenues that could lead to some economic salvation, some benefits, tangible benefits to our people. We have to keep an open mind. We have to explore every opportunity, Madam Speaker, that presents itself to see whether it can uplift our people. But I cannot in conscience see a program that has potential to help the people of our nation and choose not to speak on it, and the potentials and the benefits that that program will have just because I sit on the opposition benches. I can't in conscience do that. I have to see when an act of Parliament is brought here and it's good for the people, I'm going to speak for it. If it needs tweaking, if it needs amendments, if it needs conditionalities, I'm going to speak my mind without fear or favor. And these sentiments are my personal opinions, not those of the executive of the Antigua Labour Party, which I'm a member, and they have taken a decision, and I respect that. But that does not preclude me from making my position known in what I think is in the best interest. I don't think any other politician in this country, on both sides of the aisle, including the Honourable Member for St. John's, Rural West, the Honourable Prime Minister, is bombarded every day as much as I am for help, financial help, persons paying school fees, electricity, food. I've never seen it like that, never in Antigua. We need to do something. We need to bring our brain power together to do something to bring us out of this economic doldrum. Excuse me. But if in time, Madam Speaker, with opportunities that we might pursue in time of a crisis like now, does not necessarily have to become permanent fixtures of our future. If in time particular measures like what we seek to pass today serve their purpose or prove to be unpalatable, there's no reason that we cannot come back to Parliament and amend them, tweak it, or even end them after a certain time frame. But we ought not to reject them out of hand without first assessing their benefit to the nation and to the people. Nor should we accept them without ensuring that we study every single aspect of the opportunity, its upside, its downside, its administration, its monitoring, its accountability, and its review. Madam Speaker, I'm aware that there are many people in our beloved Antigua and Barbuda family who hold strongly to the view that our country ought not to sell its citizenship and its passports. They argue with some compelling emotion that our citizenship and passports are our natural patrimony, in a sense, our gift from the Almighty Father. And they should be treated as sacrosanct, not sold like a commodity to persons rich enough to buy them. I understand and respect those emotional arguments, Madam Speaker. I sympathize with that, and I can understand the rationale. A country coming out of slavery into post-colonial era, then into independence, and having that passport and citizenship is sacrosanct to its people. But that is why, Madam Speaker, even as I would argue for the adoption of this legislation, because it would help to meet the financial needs of our country in the short term, I would insist that the present draft legislation before this Honourable House be amended to provide proper safeguards, effective monitoring, proper conditions, and a time frame by which it will be reviewed. And I will develop this argument later, Madam Speaker, in my presentation. I am painfully aware that the view I now put before this Honourable House is not shared by all the comrades in the great Antigua and Barbuda Labour Party. I know I'll get a lot of flack after my presentation tonight, but my shoulders are broad. And once I have conviction and I believe in something, I don't care what they say out there on the radio or in the press. It doesn't deter me. But let me be clear that I respect their doubts and their misgivings. My only departure from their view is that what I've indicated so far, our country's economy is in a mess. Its finances are in a drought, and we cannot fasten our thinking so rigidly that we dismiss an opportunity for some relief for our people. What we have to be sure of, Madam Speaker, is that legislation does not tie us into the future, that it has a life that must be monitored and reviewed, and that the machinery that we put in place this evening must be properly regulated, its funds fairly and equitably allocated, and its benefits measured by a bipartisan committee of this Parliament, given authority under the law to oversee and review it. Madam Speaker, as I've said, I'm aware that there will be detractors who will claim that I've separated myself from a decision that my party has announced, a decision to reject this legislation altogether. In one sense, that accusation will be true, but not in every sense. I want to make it abundantly clear, though, from this onset, that I discussed this issue on more than one occasion, as recently as 2 weeks ago, with my political leader. And he gave me his fiat. He said to me that I could come here to Parliament and espouse my personal views, although the executive have taken a decision. And he personally, too, was not opposed philosophically and ideologically to economic citizenship, as it could bring many benefits to our country. However, he cautioned me that my support should be with conditions which I will articulate in my presentation. Madam Speaker, I'm also very aware that the Antigua and Barbuda Labour Party comprises honourable people who understand and encourage the robust expression and distillation of different opinions and perspectives. My esteemed political leader and others who may be genuinely, sincerely from their heart, or politically opportunistically, because they may not think it's the right political, psychological moment to do it, and they may be opposed to this program, that does not preclude me, Madam Speaker, from articulating my views. This is not a fundamental philosophical position of the LP, but is a policy decision which can change at any time. And even though my position may not have the support of the majority of the party's executive at this time, that does not preclude me from having a different opinion. And gentlemen, we must always allow ideas and diversity of views to contend and to flourish. The reality is I've always treated with the issue responsibly, and I've always demonstrated full respect for differing opinions. I have no fight or any quarrel with those who see the issue differently. It is a waste of time and energy for anyone to attempt to accentuate a difference of opinion on a policy issue into some type of political chasm. It's a waste of time. We must put the country first. And it is within this context of these fundamental principles upon which Labour operates, and that I've always known the great Antigua Labour Party to operate, that I express my opinions here this evening. I have formulated these opinions, Madam Speaker, out of the painful recognition of the suffering of our people as a result, for the most part, of the policies of an administration which for the past 9 long years have caused grievous disappointments and calamitous setbacks to the people of this nation. As the representative of one of the hardest hit, poorest constituencies in our country, the Honourable Member for St. John's City West, the Honourable Gaston Brown, was deeply concerned about the welfare of our country. Recognizing that we have lost almost 20% of GDP during the past 3.5 years and that we are collectively poorer, it was he who suggested to the United Progressive Party government, via his budget parliamentary debate, the implementation of the Economic Citizenship Program nearly 3 years ago. That's a fact of matter. We can't get away from it. And he's not running from it. He's a man of integrity. He's going to stand by his words and what he has espoused. And that's why I have so much respect for you. And that's why I'm going to support you as my next political leader of the great Antigua Labour Party. The UPP government was vigorously opposed to the concept at that time. But a few years later, they seem to have changed its position. The UPP government, maybe it was out of a failure to expand the economy, not being aggressive enough to attract direct foreign investment, that you are now forced to examine the merits of this program, a proposal which you first scoffed at. The reality is we are collectively poorer, Madam Speaker, and poverty breeds crime. They cannot even pay for the government's energy supply, and they cannot pay pensions to people who have worked hard all their lives to feed and uplift themselves, their families, and their nation. I have formulated these opinions out of the economic, social, financial, and fiscal deep dungeon in which we have been thrown into by this present administration. And I have formulated these opinions out of my recognition that urgent steps must be taken to provide a strong stimulus, Madam Speaker, to create economic activity, to provide jobs, to attract investment, to attract the super wealthy to come into our country, to build hotels, to build villas, so that our people can have jobs and the government can reduce government debt and provide much needed relief to the people of our country. Madam Speaker, again I refer to our pensioners. When we're at a point where they cannot be paid, it means that Social Security is flat broke. We are at rock bottom. The present government continues to blame others, but they had 9 long years in office of running the show. The performance has to be theirs, Madam Speaker. And the other point is, when young Antiguans and Barbudans, high school, college, and university graduates cannot find work when they come back to this country to contribute their talents, their learning, their expertise to the society and to build the economy, they've been played an unforgivingly bad hand. Our young people are not only our future, they are very much our present. And right now, they constitute the largest single group of our unemployed. And when they, our young people, through frustration of self-esteem, resort to antisocial and criminal activities and lifestyles in an effort to survive, and social stability and economic productivity are deeply compromised, it cannot get any worse than that. Madam Speaker, we are at rock bottom. When there's so much worry that the older generation cannot collect their pensioners, and the younger generation may be at risk of being lost, then it means that this administration has no respect for the past, the present, and the future of this country. We are at rock bottom, and we need to find ways out of this mess. And this bill, Madam Speaker, if it is properly structured within safeguards, adequate supervision and monitoring, it can help. It can help to provide at least one way out. Madam Speaker, what I will now seek to do is provide a perspective and recommendations based on my knowledge, my experience, and my respect for the patrimony of the people of this country, committed as I am to ensuring that if we are to proceed along this path, that the best possible foundations laid for credible and honorable, transparent, viable and sustainable economic citizenship program for this country. If we are to walk this path, we must, in the name of Antiguans and Barbudans, past, present, and future, ensure that we get it right, and get it right from the start. The bill seeks to create a mechanism for persons of other nationalities, once they invest sufficiently and are of good character and reputation, to become citizens of our country. This is by no means a new concept, Madam Speaker. Other countries have similar programs, some providing permanent residencies and others providing citizenship. There are a host of other programs in countries such as the United Kingdom, Canada, New Zealand, Switzerland, and elsewhere, where status can be earned this way. Presently, as we know, there are two countries in the Caribbean, namely St. Kitts and Nevis and Dominica, who offer economic citizenship. The program in Dominica under the previous Edison James administration was not properly regulated and was embroiled in controversy over the cheap, opportunistic sale of passports to all and sundry at a very cheap price. However, under the leadership of the current Prime Minister Roosevelt Skerritt's administration, a lot substantial has been done to regulate and improve the program to conform to international standards. St. Kitts, on the other hand, since 1984 has operated a well-respected international citizenship investment program, which has yielded significant revenues and investments, to include the EC billion-dollar Marriott Resort. And now they're breaking ground for a 5-star prestigious Park Hyatt Hotel, where the Grange developers to soon commence construction. The Christophe Harbor, over 4,000 acres of land at the Christophe Harbor, designated towards the economic citizenship program. St. Kitts boasts the cleanliness of its 28-year-old program, which has many hundreds of applicants over the years, without any abuses or without any accusations of attracting criminals or terrorists. As a nation state, Madam Speaker, we have the right to set the perimeters for citizen by naturalization. If it means amending the Constitution, where we can have a referendum, I'm not the lawyer or the Attorney General to determine how that is done. But a suitably qualified Antiguan right now can migrate to the United States of America tomorrow as a permanent resident with just a few $100,000 in his hands, do business, save his money, buy property, vote in elections, but not in presidential elections, and in time become a citizen. At the same time, our citizens of greater financial means can find an even shorter and quicker route to security of tenure in that country. Likewise, Madam Speaker, a Barbudan can invest X dollars in Austria and become a citizen of that country. So, Madam Speaker, there's nothing wrong intrinsically and conceptually with this program that offers security of tenure to foreign investors, high net worth individuals. It's not just people who can pay 400,000 US. We want to attract high net worth individuals, either in the form of permanent residency or citizenship. One may ask the question, why not a permanent resident program, Madam Speaker? Practically every wealthy nation, including the United States and Canada, has a permanent residence program. Madam Speaker, why would someone invest in a poor country to become a permanent resident when they can get residency in a wealthy country? In fact, Antigua and Barbuda's permanent residency program, which has been in our books for nearly 20 years, has not attracted one single investor of note to date. And that's a historical fact. It was set up by the Antigua Labour Party administration. Price Waterhouse was implementing it, and it has not attracted one notable investor to date. And it's on the books for 20 years. Only a small cadre of countries, to include St. Kitts and Dominica, offers economic citizenship. And I am of the view that Antigua and Barbuda has more to offer than these countries with our beautiful landscape and our 365 beaches and our coastline and infrastructure that we have here. We have more to offer than St. Kitts and Dominica, Madam Speaker. And therefore we would outperform them. And incidentally, I heard one of our members saying that Austria does not have a citizenship program. That is incorrect. Austria does have a citizenship program. The articulations that we will only attract criminals with international criminal intent or to evade taxes is nothing more than scaremongering tactics. And we must be honest with each other, man, and stop fooling the people out there. How St. Kitts don't attract all these criminals and terrorists? If the industry is properly regulated and proper checks and balances and proper due diligence, not one single criminal or one single terrorist have applied or been granted citizenship in 28 years in St. Kitts. So stop scaring the people. There are many bona fide investors, very super wealthy, high net worth people. I name one. You have a fellow by the name of Roderick Thompson, who is an economic citizen of St. Kitts. He founded Skype. He founded Baidu. He founded Instinet, a multi-billionaire into natural resources. Oil. He's an economic citizen of St. Kitts now for over 14 years. You have Qutaiba Al-Gahinim from Kuwait. I'm sure Prime Minister Spencer knows Qutaiba. He's the single largest shareholder of the Kuwaiti Bank, the Bank of Kuwait. He's doing a huge development. Wealthy people over the years, St. Kitts have been able. So it's not the fly-by-night investors that we're bringing here, or we're seeking to bring here. Peter Verdi, Dev Bath, they're into commodities, oil, natural gas. Dev Bath is an economic citizen of St. Kitts for now 15 years. One of the richest, youngest property developers with over $5 billion, £5 billion, under property management in the United Kingdom. They're into renewable energy, they're into solar, wind, oil, trading, property, banking. He sits on the Coutts Bank as one of the governors. You think they would have a minority Indian descent, although he was born in Bristol in England, sitting as a governor on the Queen's Bank if he was not a reputable investor? These are the kind of people we want to bring here. I did bring a few of them here. The articulations, Madam Speaker, that alternate citizenship can be an asset for international tax planning, safety and security, as well as a protective shield for individuals who live in volatile, unsafe countries. The program should be designed to attract bona fide investors seeking to reside in a peaceful country like ours, stable politically, with an attractive tax regime. Investors from countries that are ostracized, and investors like Americans who conduct business in countries in which they are despised and are susceptible to acts of terrorism. Citizens of wealthy countries who are desirous of escaping exorbitant taxes imposed by greedy governments and wealthy citizens of countries with repressive regimes will also find economic citizenship very attractive. Economic citizenship could also provide wealthy individuals with increased banking and investment privacy and wealth preservation. And this augurs well for our offshore financial services industry and the wealth management product of the country. Therefore, Madam Speaker, doing nothing is not an option, and to be overly cautious and watch our economy die a slow death is equally unattractive. And I rather, Madam Speaker, to be over here on the opposition benches of a successful country than to be in government in a failed state. So if I can echo my sentiments over here in opposition and contribute to the debate that will elevate this economy to help the citizens and people out there, I will do it without fear or favor, and without fearful of the ramifications that will follow. So I said doing nothing is not an option. But the devil, as they say, is in the detail, Madam Speaker. So as I've said, the important thing is that we have to have this program. It must be properly structured, monitored, managed, It must not be operated in a closeted and secretive manner hidden away from the scrutiny and the knowledge of naval string-born Antiguans and Barbudans. It must be competitive, attractive to decent people of means, and it must not be open-ended. It cannot be a free-for-all, Madam Speaker. So let us look quickly at a scenario, Madam Speaker. I'm sure that most of our citizens would be happy if we could have 100 new condominiums or villas built in our country each year for, say, the next 20 years. And if each such condominium or villa sells for US $400,000, that would represent $40 million a year. That is EC $108 million a year, or US 800 million, or EC 2.16 billion over the next 20 years, just in sales of those units. Imagine how many jobs and how many steady economic activity it would provide for our people, and how much added revenue for the government, all of which are very much needed. But we have to make sure, Madam Speaker, that much of that money gets into the local hands, and that what gets into the government's hands is put to prudent use. In short, our people must be empowered by the process, and in every aspect of the process, from being developers to tourism industry managers and workers, to providers of goods and services of all descriptions and skilled and unskilled workers. In addition, Madam Speaker, to the US 400,000, that is the selling price, and it can be higher. You can have villas for 500, 600, 700,000. You have properties down at Jolly Harbor selling for $1 million US. Plots of land alone on the water. That will be generated as a result of the construction of the unit. An administrative fee of US 50,000 will be paid to the government for the main applicant. 100 of those a year adds up to US $5 million in fees alone, just off of 100 units, or US $100 million over 20 years. But the government will also collect transfer fees when the units are sold, stamp duty, property taxes each year, and increase revenues generally as a result of the expanded economic activity arising from the additional investment in the country. And if the units are rented, Madam Speaker, and are part of a hotel pool arrangement, then the hotel accommodation tax is also collected. So you're expanding the economy, you're expanding the tax base. All this makes sense, Madam Speaker, if it is properly monitored and managed, Mr. Prime Minister. There's no reason whatsoever why Antiguans and Barbudans cannot develop and sell and be owners of these developments, which means even more empowerment for our people, our local indigenous people. But, Madam Speaker, today's world is far more competitive than yesterday's world. And in this business, there are other jurisdictions there ahead of us and better known. And I believe that we need to go through an apprenticeship period, albeit as short as possible. I would therefore respectfully suggest to the government the investment minimum be lowered from US 400,000 to US 350,000 as we start out, and that the administrative fee be US 35,000 instead of US 50,000 for the main applicant. That savings of US 60,000 could make a big difference to an applicant, Madam Speaker. But once a person is invested, the flow of economic activity, 35,000 instead of 50,000, I'm suggesting that the administrative fee be lowered from 50,000 to 35,000 for the main applicant. Also in this bill, it is proposed that the spouse of the main applicant pay the same US $50,000 administrative fee. In some cases, the spouse pays only US 25,000. Why are we asking the spouse to pay 50,000? We are just starting out. I think that to be competitive in the market, Madam Speaker, we need to set ours at 25,000 US as well. For this, yes, for the spouse. The bill also proposes to charge an administrative fee of US $50,000 to each dependent person 18 years or older. I suggest that during our startup period, this should be lowered to US 35,000. That's for each dependent person, Mr. Prime Minister, that are 18 years or older. You are charging 50,000 US right now. I'm suggesting that it should be for the startup lowered to 35,000. Madam Speaker, it is not unusual in economics to apply a multiplier effect of 10 to each dollar invested in the economy. And if we do so in this case, we can see over a 10-year period a sale of 2,000 units at US 350,000. That's the minimum each. That would represent 350 million US dollars in sales alone. That's without transfer tax, stamp duty, lawyer fees. That's $1 billion alone just in the sale of villas. That's no small change. Additionally, the government fees and transfers, administrative fees could account for another US 100 million or 270 million EC over 10 years. That is money that can be put to good use for the people of Antigua and Barbuda, to build schools and buy medication for our hospital and build sporting complexes and pay salaries and wages and upgrade our infrastructure and our roads. The offer of citizenship is attractive to persons in terms of ease of travel, tax issues, and so on. All legitimate concerns, all legal and above board. Concerns for high net, very wealthy people all over the world. So it would definitely make all of the difference in the world in terms of creating a source of financing for this much needed economic stimulus for our country. And the record in other countries show that most, if not all of these people do not actually change their countries of residency. They still keep their country of residency. They just seek the passports for the reasons stated before. But even if some of them do come to live here with us, they're more than likely to be conscientious and generous members of the community, contributing to worthy causes. I see what they've done in St. Kitts. Donate to the hospital, donate to the fines, donate to a lot of social infrastructure things. You know, they get a little award from the Prime Minister, a little banquet, and they feel so pleased, multi-billionaires, give us money for hospital, for Vivian Richards Stadium, to maintain it, our museum. You know, it could be so helpful. This, of course, Madam Speaker, is predicated on need to ensure that we do very strict due diligence, and the process must be put in the hands of professionals with absolutely no political interference and meddling except for a bipartisan committee of parliamentarians who would have oversight and would monitor the program. Such a bipartisan parliamentary committee would not only be democratic, it would respond to the doubts of the people in our country. And then, Madam Speaker, you can take a copy of the audit, which could be sent routinely to the major trading partners like the United States, United Kingdom, and Canada, to allay any fears that those governments may have about the integrity of your program. In St. Kitts, the government opens up their books, I think quarterly or semi-annually, to the US, the Canadian, and the British governments. Come and inspect it. Make sure everything is there. Everything is above board. There's a very appropriate cliche, Madam Speaker. Nothing ventured, nothing done. Nothing gained. Nothing gained, Madam Speaker. The time has come for us to step up and step out and take some bold initiatives to move our country forward. If we were in government, we would be doing it, man. We wouldn't sit on our laurels and let this economy crumble and people hungry out there and they can't pay the electricity bills and hardship on their families and can't send their children to school. Antigua and Barbuda has the potential to become the tourism and financial services center of the Caribbean. But this will not happen in a totally risk-averse environment or one of policy paralysis. Madam Speaker, we got to be adventurous and creative. Yes, we must guard against recklessness. Yes, we must become more entrepreneurial with our governance of the country with developing sustainable competitive advantage of our regional competitors. But we have become so laissez-faire. Do nothing, sit down. Where's the revenue going to come from? When Cuba opens up, what's going to happen to tourism in all these small islands? You ever think of that? Madam Speaker, we also need to review the due diligence fees that are listed in this bill. The $7,500 US for the principal applicant is an acceptable figure. But for the spouse, as with dependents 16 years and over, the fee should be US $4,000. If we are to be competitive, and that should be the goal. We are new. St. Kitts have had it now for 28 years. We want to be not too cheap. We don't want to cheapen our program. But why make it more expensive? We got to build this program. It's going to take time, Madam Speaker. If in addition, Madam Speaker, to the investors in the 100 units, another 100 persons can be attracted each year to make contributions of US $200,000 to the proposed National Development Fund. We are looking at an additional 20 million US, or EC $54 million, plus significant administrative fees going into government revenue every single year. That is serious money, which can be used to bring down government debt, maintain, upgrade, and expand our infrastructure, and stimulate and sustain a massive amount of economic activity within our country. We're going to turn our backs on that, Madam Speaker? I say no. Now, Madam Speaker, I come to the cautions and the conditions which I would support this bill. Number one, there must be specific targets and programs and projects to which this money is to be directed. Number two, no company or firm or individual is to get any exclusive deal to market or promote this program. 3, no company or firm is to get any commission to market or promote this program. 4, let us open it up all to reputable service providers, and the key word, reputable service providers throughout the world, including firms in Antigua and Barbuda, and let them generate the applicants for us. They will collect the fees from their clients, the applicants. 5, let us insist with these service providers that all processing and applications must be done exclusively by local attorneys, accountants, firms, or corporate secretaries in good standing and duly licensed in Antigua and Barbuda. And that if non-Antiguans are to be part of these local service provider firms or companies, that there be CARICOM citizens by birth or descent or naturalization. All funds collected under the non-real estate option are to go into the government account under the National Economic and Social Transformation Fund of Antigua and Barbuda, and be under the scrutiny of the Director of Audit. We must respect, Madam Speaker, Section 90 of our Constitution. 7, we cannot treat it as money that some board of councillors of some charity acting as puppets and surrogates of someone in power can use as a poke barrel and some powerful person's discretionary piggy bank. I'm totally against this charitable thing. It is the people's money. 8, the National Economic and Social Transformation Fund, or NESTFAB, must be monitored on a regular basis by a committee of stakeholders representing equally, including government, parliamentary opposition, the private sector, workers, social partners, youth, sport, and a member each of the legal and accounting professions. This committee must present to the Minister an annual report on his observations, and such report must be published within 30 days of the Minister receiving it. The Minister must also table it to Parliament, and he or she must also file his or her annual report on the Economic Citizenship Programme together with a separate audited report thereof in Parliament, with all parliamentarians in both houses receiving copies of the same. 9, the application process must be expeditious and efficient, and the citizenship by investment units must be set up with suitably qualified and committed and professional individuals, Madam Speaker. I stress, suitably qualified and committed and professional individuals. No political patronage, Mr. Prime Minister. No square pegs in round holes. 10, the introduction of this program must signal a new way of governance in Antigua and Barbuda, with greater consultation between government and other stakeholders in terms of policies, practices, and projects, so that there can be wider consensus and a sense of shared ownership of the responsibility and the input of our nation's development, whether it be in regard to paying debt, upgrading infrastructure, or reorganizing our economy, our approach to education, or health. 11, without a doubt, Madam Speaker, we have to emphasize on building a new consciousness, a greater hunger for skills in personal and civic responsibility and nation building. 12, I would recommend, Mr. Prime Minister, that a cap of, say, 2,000 citizenships be granted over the next 10 years, and that the program be used as a vehicle for true economic and social transformation rather than an industry. So I would cap it 10-year timeline, maximum 2,000 applications. I further recommend that citizenships granted be specific to holders and not subject to descent or marriage. That there be no voting rights, and I repeat that. They should have no voting rights. That the applicants should not have to come to Antigua and Barbuda to be interviewed or to spend a week in each year, because there are simply matters that can create obstacles and deterrents, Madam Speaker. You have these rich multi-billionaire people and you tell them to come here to be interviewed and they have to live here for 15 days. I tell you, go jump in the lake. Why can't they go to our High Commission office in London or New York or in Washington and swear the oath of allegiance where our consular offices are? They don't need to travel all the way to Antigua. They're busy people, wealthy people, going about their business every day. But if they're interested, they invest. We have the due diligence done strictly, and once that is successful, that is the end of it. 13, should an owner sell his or her unit to a non-citizen, his or her citizenship and that of his or her spouse and dependents lapse automatically and immediately, and the new owner becomes eligible along with his or her spouse and dependents to apply for citizenship by virtue of the investment. 14, upon the death of an owner, his or her beneficiary to the unit, if suitably qualified, should be eligible for citizenship, if not already a citizen, upon payment of the appropriate fees to the government, and a death duty or special tax should apply in such a case. I would suggest, Mr. Prime Minister, Mr. Minister of Finance, 10% of the gross value of the assets of the deceased in Antigua and Barbuda. Should such beneficiary not qualify or is not interested in our citizenship or is unable to pay the required fees and death duty within 1 year following the death of the owner, ownership of the unit shall be vested automatically and without payment back into the government or some other entity of the government. 15, no order in terms of any divorce settlement by any court of law outside the OECS shall be binding with regard, you would love this, the ownership of a unit unless a person has satisfied the requirements of eligibility under our law without prejudice, of course, to them being entitled to the proceeds of sale of such unit, subject to special duty or tax that would apply especially in such a case. 16, successful applicants ought not to be free to invest as they wish in Antigua and Barbuda. We got to protect our local indigenous business people. They should require permission beyond the investment which they have used to acquire citizenship. And the rationale for this, Madam Speaker, is that while the investment capital may be welcome, we must ensure that our naval string, Antiguans and Barbudans, are not mere hewers of wood and carriers of water in their own land. And so economic citizens seek, and they must seek, local partners to engage in further economic activity. 17, successful applicants should be issued with passports in a specific series identifying them as economic citizens. 18, a successful applicant should be allowed to sell his or her unit after 5 years, but only his or her buyer and not the spouse and or dependents of that buyer would be eligible for citizenship by virtue of the investment. However, a sale after 10 years would render the new owner, together with his or her spouse and dependents, to apply for citizenship by virtue of the investment. An owner should also be allowed to transfer ownership in his or her unit to a company, whether an Antigua and Barbuda onshore or offshore company, or an offshore onshore company of some other jurisdiction, fully owned by himself or himself, his spouse or other dependents, who acquired citizenship together with him upon paying the ordinary applicable government transfer and stamp duty fees. 19. Should an economic citizen commit any felony anywhere in the world, his or her citizenship shall be immediately revoked. And 20. I recommend, Madam Speaker, that we engage banks operating locally with regard to providing the escrow services. We don't need banks overseas or international banks outside of our jurisdiction to hold the escrow monies for us. That is ridiculous. Empower our local banks, and all the escrow money must come to our local banks here in Antigua. 21. As I've said before, there should be established a bipartisan committee of parliamentarians who will have oversight, Mr. Prime Minister, of the legislation, oversight, and the measures and machinery that it introduces. The task of this committee shall be to have oversight of the program, to monitor it, to hold hearings, and to review all aspects of the program and the lives of the people of Antigua and Barbuda. And the bill should spell out clearly that economic citizens should not be able to vote, sir. I want to go now, Madam Speaker, to some specific clauses in the bill that I have some concern. Clause 4, Madam Speaker. What sense does it make to insist that these people spend at least 70 days in Antigua and Barbuda over the first 5 years, following registration as a citizen? Why insist that he spend any time here at all? If they want to come and spend a week, spend money in the country, they're free too. But that is a deterrent. If you tell a rich, wealthy, multi-billionaire that he must spend 15 days every single year in your country, believe me, and he can go and get it from St. Kitts or another place where you don't require to spend 1 hour, where do you think he's going to go? If you want to have a competitive economic citizenship program, then why force these persons to come here? Why interfere with them as they go about their business? And you know, the reality is, who is going to police the movements of these persons? More work again for people. More time consuming on something like that. It makes no sense. And it's bad business, Madam Speaker. Clause 5 states that the minister is not compelled to give a reason for refusing an application. And Mr. AG, I'm not sure, but does this conflict with the Constitution of Antigua and Barbuda, which at section 116 of the Constitution, it states that the minister responsible for citizenship may refuse an application for citizenship if he is satisfied that there are reasonable grounds for refusing the application in the interest of defense, public safety, public morality, and public order. In other words, this bill is saying that the minister need not explain why he has refused an application, while the Constitution, Mr. AG, seems to be putting constraints on him by setting out grounds on which he can rely to deny an application. So I wait to hear your explanation on this. The schedule, Madam Speaker, I'm comfortable with the inclusion of the words approved charitable institutions. This is vulnerable to misuse and abuse. We need to keep this thing very simple. Real estate as one path. A contribution to the National Development Fund, second part. Madam Speaker. I'm saying, where you speak about approved charitable institutions, not in the regulations, in the definitions, are we? In the definition of approved charitable organizations, institutions. I'm saying that I totally disagree with approved charitable institutions. I don't want it at all. I'm saying, Mr. Prime Minister, keep it simple. Real estate is one path, company ownership is another part, and a contribution to the National Development Fund for the third part, end of story. We don't want a situation, Mr. Prime Minister, which, without greatest respect to you, a Prime Minister can set up and exercise imperious powers over a large fund of money, which should be in a government account to be shown to the people for their scrutiny. Yes, but then it is people's money and it must go into the consolidated fund or some other government account. We have to safeguard the people against the pork barrel and corruption that could arise from this charitable institution story. You have all kind of people say this charitable institution, all they're doing is a front to rip off people. And they come and they register it under the charitable acts. And I mean, how much charitable institutions we have in Antigua? Keep it simple. We want the money for the people of the country, for the treasury, and to develop our economy. Nobody with no charitable organization. With the greatest respect. I would advise, Mr. Prime Minister, I'm totally against it, sorry. I would advise similarly, Madam Speaker, with regard to the definition of the word investment. Is it in the schedule or is it in the schedule? Page 7. I don't have my glasses on. Reference to charitable institutions need to be deleted, as I said. Approved real estate projects, approved business investments, and National Development Fund. They're enough. Then clause 4.2 should stipulate that only properly licensed legal practitioners and accountants in good standing under the laws of Antigua and Barbuda, actually engaged in providing legal and or accounting or financial services in Antigua and Barbuda shall be qualified to be appointed as agents. Again, we can see by looking not too far away how flies can swarm in, Madam Speaker, and take work from our local professionals. We do not want a situation like that. We must not allow that to happen. Clause 4.3. The criteria for agents is very subjective and left in interpretation which could give rise to possible abuse of the authority by the person issuing the licenses. Whilst it's paramount to protect the interests of the government by ensuring only proper agents are licensed, the provision requires objective criteria. Clause 5, subsection 7. Why should the applicants be forced to complete the application forms? That don't make no sense to me. Why can't the professional service providers in the countries where they are do that? And then the applicants can sign the forms, after which the completed forms are sent to the local service provider, who is the only person allowed under the law to submit the applications. Clause 5, subsection 15 states that it will take 60 days from approval for the funds to be deposited. Why? The investment should be immediate. Why 60 days? Clause 5, subsection 15b. There's a provision in respect of the business option that allows payment for prescribed amount to be paid to the provider. Should this be legislated? And if yes, why is it only applicable, Mr. AG, to the business investment option? It is nowhere else with the rest of the sections of the Act. Clause 5, subsection 16, asking an applicant to come to Antigua, as I mentioned that already, to swear an oath of allegiance or to affirm, worse so at a specified time set by the minister. That is ridiculous. That's real. We live in the real world. So our minister in Antigua, some multi-millionaire in Switzerland or in London or Brussels, oh, this is the time you must come. Drop everything you're doing. This is when you're to come. That's ridiculous. It's inconvenient, unnecessary, it's a deterrent. It helps only to make the program less attractive and less competitive. We live in the real world, Mr. Minister, and people have their work to do and other affairs to take care of, wherever in the world they may be. For the program to be practical and competitive, for it to make sense, therefore the process has to allow for applicants to make the oath or to affirm overseas at one of Antigua and Barbuda's embassies, high commission offices, or consular offices. If they don't have one in the country, they go to the closest one where they live. So if they're coming from Brussels, then they go to London. If they don't have one, they go to the other one that's closest. But we have many embassies. Clause 6.4a, under this subclause, an applicant may buy a unit of real estate in his or her name or in the name of a local company, foundation, or other approved entity. Mr.